She was invisible, a ghost in blue scrubs, working double shifts at 2 in the morning, drowning in $47,000 of medical debt from a baby she lost, and a man who told her to handle it before walking out the door forever. She had nothing, no one, not even enough money to fix a leaking faucet. But then one night, a bleeding stranger was wheeled into her emergency room, a man in a suit worth more than her yearly salary, with bodyguards carrying guns and eyes that could make a doctor step backward in fear. She cleaned his wound. He memorized her name, and when her ex-boyfriend invited her to his engagement party just to humiliate her, just to prove she was still alone, still broken, still nothing, she made one desperate phone call at 3 in the morning that changed everything. What happened next? Her ex turned white as a sheet in front of 20 guests. A $47,000 debt vanished overnight, and the most dangerous man in the city told her, "You will never, ever be ignored again." But someone else called too, with a warning. The people who get close to him end up gone, or worse. This is the story of Emma Chen, a woman who spent her whole life being safe until she realized that safety was slowly killing her. This story is about the moment a woman stops surviving and starts living, about what happens when someone who has been overlooked, abandoned, and broken finally refuses to shrink herself for the comfort of others. Whether you have been through heartbreak, betrayal, or simply felt invisible in your own life, Emma's journey will remind you, your worth was never determined by the people who failed to see it. The hospital cafeteria lights hummed above me, a constant buzzing sound like dying flies. They bathed the room in a sickly yellow light, turning my coffee into something that looked like dirty water. Still, I held the flimsy cup with both hands, trying to draw warmth into my fingers, which were always cold now. I was running on empty after 3 double shifts in just 4 days, a ghost of a person just going through the motions. The worn vinyl of the chair protested as I moved. My blue scrubs were old, thin at the knees, and clung to my exhausted frame. The sounds of a hospital at 2 in the morning surrounded me. Quiet talks between doctors, the rattle of a food tray, the piercing scream of a pager that always made my shoulders ache with tension. I knew I should be at home, asleep in my small apartment with the faucet that always dripped. A faucet I did not have the money to fix. But home was quiet, and in the quiet, my thoughts would turn. They would turn to memories I had spent the last 6 months trying to bury. Memories of Marcus, of the sound of his laughter when I told him I was pregnant. That laugh had wounded me more than any of his words. Emma Chen. A voice cut through my thoughts. I looked up and saw Dr. Morrison, an emergency room doctor, holding a clipboard. "We need your help in trauma 2. A car crash victim is coming in, about 5 minutes away." I stood up without a word, my body already on autopilot. I threw the coffee, almost full, into the trash can. Another $3 wasted that I could not afford to lose. But this was my life now. A string of little wastes and little pains that added up to a life I barely even knew was mine. The emergency room was a storm of controlled activity when I walked through the doors. The nurses moved with an easy skill, making beds ready and checking their tools. The wide doors to the ambulance bay were open to the November cold. A chill wind blew in, smelling of rain and wet pavement. I put on new gloves and inspected the trauma cart. My hands knew what to do without me thinking. It felt like I was blind, just sleepwalking through my own life, unseen by anyone, even by myself. The sound of the siren grew louder. Flashing red and blue lights danced across the walls. "It was a single car accident," the paramedic shouted as they pushed the gurney inside. "The patient is a man in his late 20s, fully conscious. Vitals are good. He did not want to come." "I am fine." The voice that broke through the organized noise was like smooth velvet covering hard steel. It was the kind of voice that made you stop what you were doing and pay attention. "This is not necessary." I glanced up from the cart, and my world shifted. He was sitting on this gurney as if it were a throne, his back straight, even with the blood trickling from a cut on his head. He wore a suit that I knew cost more than I earned in half a year. It was ripped at the shoulder, and his white shirt underneath was stained with red. But it was his face that made me freeze. He had high cheekbones and a strong jaw, like a statue. His dark eyes scanned the room with a sharp focus that felt like a soldier's assessment. He looked to be around 30 years old, but his eyes held a wisdom far beyond his years, the look of someone who had witnessed too much and forgotten nothing. Two men in dark suits stood behind him like guards at a gate. The fabric of their jackets strained slightly over their hips. They were not hospital security, and they were not the police. They were something else. "Sir, we have to check you for injuries," Dr. Morrison said, his voice strained. I knew that sound. It was the sound he made when he was scared but trying to hide it. The man turned his stare on the doctor, and I saw Dr. Morrison physically take a step backward. "I have had worse cuts from shaving. Just patch it up so I can get out of here. It is hospital policy that I do not care about your policy." Every word was spoken with calm control, but there was a dangerous edge underneath. "Clean the wound now." Dr. Morrison's gaze met mine from across the room. "Nurse Chen, please take care of this. I have to see the patient in Bay 3. I thought he was a coward, but I did not blame him. Every part of me wanted to say no, to make up any excuse to get away. This man gave off a feeling of danger, like a fire gives off heat. It was invisible, but you could feel it. But I was just so tired. I was so deeply tired that being afraid felt like one more feeling I had no energy for. "Of course," I heard my own voice say. I took my supplies, antiseptic, bandages, and walked toward the gurney. He was even more intense up close. He smelled of rich cologne and leather, and something metallic underneath. It might have been blood, or maybe it was gunpowder. The smell made me feel dizzy. "This might hurt a little," I said, my voice sounding much calmer than I was. I had treated gang members and people who had overdosed, people who had tried to hurt themselves or someone else. I could handle one man with a head injury, no matter how much he unsettled me. I reached out to wipe the blood from his forehead, and his hand moved like lightning, grabbing my wrist. His grip was not painful, but it was strong enough to make me stop. His skin was warm on mine, and I could feel my own pulse beating against his fingers. "Your hands are shaking." He was not asking. "I am fine." I tried to pull my hand back, but he did not let go. "I need to clean that cut before it becomes infected." His eyes locked with mine, and I felt completely trapped, like a butterfly pinned in a display case. His eyes were darker than I first thought, almost black under the bright hospital lights. And I saw something in them that took my breath away. It was not meanness. It was the total confidence of a man who had never been denied anything in his life and would not know what to do if he was. "When did you last sleep?" he asked me. The question was so out of place that I let out a short, bitter laugh. "What are you, my doctor now?" "Answer the question. I do not have to answer you. You are the patient here, not the one asking questions." I pulled my wrist again, and this time he released me. My skin burned where he had held it. "Now hold still and let me do my job." For a second, I thought he would argue, but then his expression changed. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. "You are not afraid of me. Should I be?" I began to clean his wound, and my hands were steady now, somehow. The cut was not very deep. It would not require stitches, just some tape to hold it closed and a lecture about concussions, but he would just ignore it. He offered no reply. Instead, he watched me work with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I felt the gaze of his guards, their presence a heavy weight on my back. "You are very skilled at this," he said after a quiet moment. "It is my profession." That is not what I meant. I did not ask for an explanation. I had no desire to know what he meant, or why his voice twisted something deep inside my stomach. I focused entirely on the wound, on the familiar rhythm of cleaning and stitching, on anything except the way he studied me as if I were a complex puzzle he was determined to solve. Finished, I said, taking a step back as I pulled off my gloves. You truly need to remain for observation, but I assume you will not. Your assumption is correct, he said as he rose. I then saw he was tall, at least 6 feet 2 inches, with a powerful frame that suggested time in a gym and a capacity for violence. What is your name? It is on my identification badge. Want to hear it from you. Something in his voice made refusal feel like an impossibility, while every logical part of my mind screamed for me to leave. Emma. Emma Chen. He spoke my name slowly, as if he were savoring each sound. Emma Chen. Then he took out his phone. Actually, it was phones, plural, as I saw he had at least 2 of them. He placed a call without ever looking away from me. Bring the car to the front. We are departing. Sir, you really ought to. Thank you for your assistance, Emma Chen. He moved toward the exit, his guards instantly forming a protective detail around him. He stopped at the door and turned back. You work far too hard. You should return home. Get some rest. I do not require lifestyle advice from a patient. That small smile appeared again. No. I imagine you do not. He reached inside his coat, and his guards grew tense. I saw that even they seemed uncertain of what he might do. He pulled out a business card. He offered it to me. If you ever find yourself in need of anything, I will not. But I took the card. Refusing felt like a dangerous choice, for reasons I could not explain. The card was made of thick, expensive paper. It had only a name written in a beautiful script, Damien Cross, and a phone number. You might be surprised, he said. And then he was gone, disappearing into the night with his team of shadows. I just stood there, holding the card, my heart racing, my skin still tingling where he had touched me. The emergency room had gone back to its usual state of controlled chaos around me. But the air felt different now, as if he had left a piece of his presence behind. Emma. Sarah, another nurse, came to my side. Are you all right? You look like you just saw a ghost. I am fine. I put the card into my pocket. I am just tired. That man was something else. Did you see his bodyguards? I am almost certain they were carrying guns. I did not notice. That was a lie. I had what he might do. The rest of my shift was a hazy memory. I cared for a child with a fractured arm, an older woman experiencing chest pain, and an intoxicated university student who fell from a roof to impress his peers. These were normal events, safe events, events that did not cause my heart to pound or my hands to tremble. But when I finally ended my shift at 6 in the morning, walking into the gray light of a November dawn, I found myself holding his card. I stared at the name, asking myself who Damien Cross was, and why he had looked at me as if I were the most captivating person he had seen in a very long time. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Marcus. Lunch this week. We need to talk. We need to talk, as if he had not made his feelings perfectly clear 6 months prior when he told me to handle it before walking out of my life, never once looking back. I erased the message without a reply and began the long walk to the bus stop. My feet hurt, my back hurt, my entire body ached. The morning chill was sharp enough to sting my lungs, while sirens wailed somewhere in the city. I tried to throw the business card into the first trash receptacle I saw. My hand froze mid-action, hovering over the bin, unable to release the small piece of paper. With a sigh of frustration, I pushed it deep into my pocket and continued on my way. 3 days later, I returned to the emergency room for another night shift, and my world fell apart in a way I could have never predicted. The evening began as it always did. I signed in, went over patient files, and helped prepare for what would surely be a hectic Friday night. Dr. Morrison was absent, replaced by Dr. Patterson, who at least did not treat me as if I were fragile every time we spoke. At 7 in the evening, Sarah found me while I was restocking medical supplies. Hey, there is a man at the front desk asking for you. My stomach plummeted. Who is it? He would not give his name. He only said it was a personal, urgent matter. She raised her eyebrows playfully. He is incredibly handsome, like unbelievably so. Is there something you have not told me? But I was already walking past her, my heart beating a frantic rhythm against my chest, because I was certain, absolutely certain, I knew who was there for me. I was wrong. Marcus was standing in the waiting area, looking identical to how he had 6 months ago when he left. He had the same perfect hair, the same perfect suit, and the same perfect smile that once made me believe in happy endings, but now only made me sick. A woman I did not recognize stood beside him. She was tall, blonde, and wore a diamond on her left hand that shone like a small star. Emma. Marcus's voice was warm and familiar, as if we were just old friends meeting again. I have been trying to get in touch with you. I have been occupied. I folded my arms across my chest, suddenly aware of my wrinkled uniform, my messy bun, and the dark circles beneath my eyes. Next to his fiancée, which the ring clearly announced, I looked like a complete mess. "This is Amber," he said, placing his arm around her waist. "Amber, this is Emma. We were colleagues once." Colleagues. That was the word he chose. Not "we dated for 2 years." Not "I became pregnant." Just colleagues. "It is a pleasure to meet you," Amber said, her smile flawless and cold. "You as well." I focused again on Marcus. "What is it that you want?" "As I said in my message, we need to speak. I am hosting a small dinner party tomorrow evening. It is an engagement party, really, at the Sterling. You should attend." The Sterling. Of course. It was the most exclusive restaurant in the city, a place where getting a table required a 6-month wait and a credit card without a limit. "I am working. Cancel your shift. It will be enjoyable. You can get to know all of our friends, celebrate our happiness." His smile grew wider. "Unless you are worried about attending by yourself. I know you do not really have anyone." And there it was. The blade slipped between my ribs so cleanly, I almost did not register the wound, except I did register it. I registered everything. The humiliation burned inside of me like acid. "You arrived alone." Those words would follow me. I knew it. Tomorrow evening, when I failed to appear, he would say them to someone else, to all of them. She arrived alone. Poor Emma, still all by herself, cannot even find a date. "I will consider it," I was able to say. Excellent. He was already turning from me, already done with me. 8 in the evening. Do not be late. I watched them go. I watched Marcus bend down and whisper something to Amber that made her laugh. I watched them vanish into the city night as if they had never been there at all. My hands were shaking again. I squeezed them into fists, my fingernails digging into my skin. Sarah was suddenly standing next to me. "Are you all right?" "I am fine." "That was your former boyfriend, was it not? The one who—" I said I am fine. I was not fine. I was the complete opposite of fine. I was the kind of not fine that compels people to do foolish, impulsive, and potentially catastrophic things, like retrieving a number from their locker at 3 in the morning, during a rest period they had not earned and should not have been on. It was like staring at that phone number for a solid 20 minutes. It was like dialing it before they could convince themselves it was a terrible idea. The phone rang once, and then twice. Then, a voice. Yes. The sound was deep and measured, feeling both recognizable and completely alien. "Mr. Cross." My own voice sounded much weaker than I wanted. "This is Emma Chen, from the hospital. We saw each other a few days ago." The silence stretched so long I was sure he had disconnected or had no memory of me. Or perhaps, Emma. He spoke my name like a vow. "I had a feeling you would call. I need your help." The words rushed out of me before I could hold them back. There is this event tomorrow evening, a dinner, and I require a companion," I stated, not asked. "A date," I clarified, my cheeks burning even though he was not there to see, "just for a couple of hours. I realize this is a huge imposition, and you likely have more important things to do. But I would not be calling if I were not completely desperate. And what time am I picking you up? I stopped my rambling speech. What? What time? He repeated, each word spoken with intent. Should I come get you? 7:30, I heard my own voice say. But you really do not have to. Your address. I recited it for him, my thoughts racing. This was not sane. This was far from sane. I did not know this man. I knew nothing about him, other than the fact that he had bodyguards, wore expensive suits, and had eyes that perceived far too much. Emma. His voice deepened, becoming intimate in a way that made my stomach clench. Who made you believe you had to make this phone call? It is not important. It is important to me. Why? The question escaped me. Why would you care? You have no idea who I am. There was another pause. No, he said. But I am going to. A noise came from his side of the call. Someone was speaking quickly, possibly in Italian. I need to go. 7:30 tomorrow. Wear something that makes you feel strong. He ended the call before I had a chance to reply. I remained in the break room, the phone tight in my hand, wondering what I had just committed to, and why. For the first time in 6 long months, I no longer felt quite so invisible. I stood before my closet the following evening, looking at the sparse collection of clothes inside, as if they could magically become something suitable for a dinner at the Sterling. They could not. There were 3 sets of scrubs and 2 pairs of jeans, both well worn. A simple black dress I had worn to my grandmother's funeral 5 years earlier. A summer dress with a faint coffee stain I could never remove. This was the sum of my life. It was all hanging on thin wire hangers in a closet that had a slight scent of must. Wear an outfit that makes you feel powerful. Those were his words. I did not own a single thing that made me feel powerful. I owned items that helped me blend in, which had been my goal for months. Blending in meant being safe. Blending in meant Marcus and his perfect world could no longer break me. But tonight, I had to be seen. I had to enter that restaurant on a stranger's arm, pretending I belonged. Power, I was learning, was the only real protection. Stay with me to see how. My phone vibrated with a text from a number I did not know. I am sending a car. It will arrive at 6. Be ready. My fingers hovered, ready to ask who this was or why, or how they got my number. Before I could type, a second message appeared. Trust me. Trust him. I had spoken to this man for maybe 15 minutes total, and he was asking for my faith. The craziest part was that a small piece of me gave it to him. At precisely 6 o'clock, my apartment buzzer sounded. I grabbed my jacket, the only one I owned without torn pockets, and went downstairs. I expected a taxi, maybe a simple black car. Instead, a massive sport utility vehicle was idling by the curb, its windows so dark they might as well have been solid walls. The driver, a giant of a man in a perfectly tailored suit, stood beside the passenger door. When he saw me, he gave a slight nod and opened it. Miss Chen, Mr. Cross is waiting for you. I stopped on the sidewalk. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was how people vanished. This was how young women became a news story, their pictures flashing on a screen while anchors spoke of tragedy and how no one saw it coming. But I stepped into the vehicle anyway. The alternative was walking into the Sterling by myself, in my funeral dress, and seeing the cruel smile on Marcus's face when he knew I had come alone. The inside of the car smelled of leather and something else I could not name, something clean and expensive. The seats were warm. A bottle of water, still cold, was waiting in the cup holder. We moved through the city as night began to fall, the streetlights igniting one after another like new stars. I watched my own neighborhood fade into nicer ones, saw the buildings grow taller and their surfaces cleaner. I watched the people on the street begin to wear clothes that cost more than my rent for a month. Finally, we stopped in front of a building I had passed 1,000 times but never dared to enter. It soared into the darkening sky, a monument of wealth made of glass and steel and quiet power. It was the kind of building where even the doorman probably earned more than I did. The driver opened my door. "Seventh floor. They are expecting you." They? But he was already back behind the wheel, and the vehicle was pulling away from the curb. I was left standing on the pavement in my thin jacket, feeling as if I had accidentally stepped into another person's life. The doorman opened the main entrance without me asking. The elevator was lined with mirrors and lit with a soft glow that flattered everyone. I watched my own reflection repeat into infinity, and I wondered if every version of me was as terrified as I was. The seventh floor had only a single door. The penthouse, of course. I lifted my hand to knock, but then I paused. This was madness. This was... The door swung open. A woman was standing there, elegant and composed, her silver hair styled into a perfect chignon. She was dressed entirely in black, simple but clearly very costly, and her smile was one of genuine warmth that lit up her eyes. "Emma, please come in. Come in. We are on a tight schedule." She guided me inside before I could find the words to reply. "My name is Teresa. Mr. Cross requested I assist you in getting ready." The apartment, no, it was a penthouse. Calling it an apartment would be like calling the sea a puddle, was defined by clean lines and windows that stretched from the floor to the ceiling, offering a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was sparse but obviously worth more than my car, more than several of my cars. In fact, more than every car I had ever had. "Get ready?" I finally asked. "For the dinner, my dear. Follow me. I have selected a few choices for you." She walked me down a hallway and into a bedroom that was larger than my entire apartment. 3 dresses were laid out across the bed, and each one was more stunning than the one before it. "Mr. Cross was not certain of your measurements, so I brought a few. We can see what fits." My mind was having trouble keeping up. Mr. Cross arranged all of this. He can be remarkably considerate when he chooses to be. Teresa was already lifting the first gown, a rich burgundy that seemed to glow in the light. Although, just between us, I have never known him to go to such lengths for anyone. "You must have left a significant impression. I just cleaned a wound on his head." That was it. Her smile was knowing, and it made my face grow warm. "Try this one on first." The dress fit as if it were custom made for me. The material clung to my shape in a way my work scrubs never could, reminding me that I had a form beyond just tired and functional. The deep color brought a warmth to my skin that I had forgotten was there. Teresa moved with speed and precision, like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. She arranged my hair in a style that looked effortless, but was surely complex. She applied makeup with a gentle hand, enhancing my features instead of hiding them. When she finally guided me to face the large mirror, I did not recognize the person looking back. I did not look powerful, not really, but I no longer looked invisible. "Beautiful," Teresa said, her voice full of satisfaction. "He will be very pleased." "Where is he?" The words escaped before I could stop them. "He is finishing some business. He will join you at the restaurant." She handed me a small purse that perfectly matched the dress. "Your phone and identification are inside." "And Emma?" She looked at me in the mirror, her expression serious. "Do not let anyone make you feel that you are less than them. Not tonight. Not ever." The black vehicle was waiting for me when I went back downstairs. It was a different driver this time, just as large, just as silent. We drove along streets I knew, but I had never seen them like this, from inside a car that was worth more than I would make in 10 years. The Sterling appeared before us, a temple of pure excess. It was all warm lighting and impeccably dressed people who moved like they owned the world. There was valet parking and a red carpet, an actual red carpet that led to doors held open by men in perfect uniforms. I had made a horrible mistake. I did not fit in here. I did not belong anywhere near a place like this. The driver opened my door. "Miss Chen, Mr. Cross is waiting for you inside." My legs somehow managed to carry me out of the car, up the length of the red carpet, and through the tall doors that closed silently behind me. The restaurant was decorated with dark wood and lit by candles, an elegant style that whispered of wealth so old it never needed to be announced. A host materialized at my side instantly. "Miss Chen, this way, please." He led me through the main dining area, past tables of people who looked like they spent summers on yachts and winters on private ski slopes. We walked past a bar where a single serving of wine likely cost more than my power bill. I could feel every person's eyes on me, feel the weight of their judgment. Then I saw him. Damien was standing at the entrance to a private dining area, and every clear thought in my head dissolved. He was wearing a suit that made the clothes he wore at the hospital look like a rehearsal. It was perfectly tailored and all black. When his eyes met mine from across the room, his expression changed. He started walking toward me with a kind of smooth, dangerous grace that caused people to move out of his path without even thinking about it. His bodyguards, different men from before, but just as noticeable, kept their distance as he approached. He ignored them completely. "Emma." He said my name in a low tone that I felt resonate in my chest. His eyes moved over me, slowly and with purpose, and I saw a muscle in his jaw tighten. I thought I might be overdressed. I was trying for a joke, but my voice was breathless. "Perfect," he said. He offered me his arm. "They are waiting." "They?" But he was already guiding me forward, into the private room where I could hear the sound of cheerful voices and laughter. I could see a group of people around a long table set for at least 20 guests. And there, at the very head of that table, sat Marcus. He turned as we walked in, a mocking smile already on his face, his mouth opening to make a sharp comment about me showing up by myself. Then his gaze fell upon Damien, and the smile on his face froze solid. It did not just freeze, it shattered. His skin turned pale, then flushed red, then went pale again. "Marcus." Damien's voice was light and friendly, but there was an undertone to it that made the hair on my arms stand up. "What a nice surprise! I had no idea this was your engagement party." "Mr. Cross?" The name came out of Marcus's throat like he was being strangled. He jumped to his feet, almost tipping over his glass of wine. "I did not. We were not expecting." "Emma invited me." Damien's hand came to rest on the small of my back, its warmth pressing through the thin dress. The gesture felt possessive, which should have scared me, but instead it sent a current of electricity through my body. "I trust that is not a problem." The entire room had fallen completely quiet. Every single person at the table was staring at us. No, they were staring at Damien, and their faces showed a mixture of shock and poorly hidden terror. Amber's face had lost all its color, her carefully practiced smile now trembling. "Of course not," Marcus managed to say, but his voice was shaking. "You are always welcome, both of you. Please, have a seat." Damien led me toward two empty chairs that people suddenly rushed to make clear for us, nearly tripping over each other in their haste. As I sat down, he gave my hand a brief, firm squeeze beneath the table. "Relax," he whispered, his mouth so close to my ear I could feel his breath. "You are doing perfectly." But I was not relaxed at all. My heart was beating so fast and so loud that I was sure everyone could hear it. I was starting to understand that I had stumbled into something much larger than I had ever imagined. Marcus could not look at Damien. None of them could. Every person at the table watched him, their expressions tight, as if he might detonate. Their conversations were forced and hollow. "So, Emma," Amber's voice was far too cheerful. "How is it you know Mr. Cross? I was his doctor in the emergency room." My hand found my water glass, a welcome anchor in the awkward silence. "Just a few days back. How wonderful." Her confused gaze shifted between the two of us. "And you stayed in contact." He left a strong impression. Damien's tone was like silk, and under the table, his hand found mine again, his fingers weaving through my own. The motion was so easy, so familiar, as if we had done it a million times. "Emma has a certain way of staying on your mind." Marcus gripped his wineglass, his knuckles turning pale. I am certain that she does. A vile undercurrent in his voice made my stomach clench. But before I could say anything, Damien's hold on my hand tightened just a little. You know, Marcus, Damien began, his voice still casual and light, I have been wanting to ask you about those shipments that disappeared last month. The ones from the warehouse district. All the color drained from Marcus's face. I have no idea what you are referring to. Oh? Damien's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. That is odd, because I possess receipts that tell a different story. Receipts that bear your signature. The temperature in the room plunged by 10 degrees. Everyone around the table was frozen, like small animals that had just sensed a predator nearby. There has to be some sort of mistake, Marcus insisted, but his voice was hardly more than a whisper. There was a mistake, all right. Damien leaned back, exuding a calm sort of menace. The mistake was believing I would fail to notice, believing I would not care. His gaze flicked to me and then back to Marcus, believing you could treat people like they were disposable. And in that moment, I knew this was not about cargo or buildings or transactions. This was about me. This was about how Marcus had treated me, about the things he had done. Damien was doing this entirely for me. That realization struck me like a physical impact. This powerful, dangerous man I hardly knew had arranged this whole night simply because someone had caused me pain. Because Marcus had made me feel insignificant and isolated and completely worthless. Mr. Cross, Marcus pleaded, his voice cracking, I can explain everything. I am sure you could. Damien stood up, drawing me to my feet with him. But I no longer have any interest in listening. Emma and I have better things to do. He guided me toward the exit, leading me past the stunned guests, past a sickly-looking Marcus. At the doorway, Damien stopped and looked back. Congratulations on the engagement, he said. I truly hope you value what you have. Some people are never given a second chance. Then we were leaving, moving through the restaurant with every single person watching us. His hand remained on my back, a warm, firm pressure that somehow kept me moving when my legs felt like they would give out. The sport utility vehicle was there waiting. This time, he opened the door for me himself while his guards kept their distance and I slipped inside as if in a trance. He got in after me and the door shut, enclosing us together in the quiet. Silence stretched between us. The driver pulled away from the restaurant, and the city lights began to smear past the windows. I do not understand, I finally managed to say. My own voice sounded hollow and far away. What just happened back there? Who are you, really? Damien turned to me. In the faint glow from the streetlights, his eyes were dark voids that gave nothing away. I am someone who dislikes seeing others get hurt. That is not a real answer. No, it is not. He reached up to loosen his tie, and the small act felt strangely personal. The real truth, Emma Chen, is that I am someone you ought to be very afraid of. Then why do I not feel afraid? The question escaped my lips as a faint whisper. His hand rose, and his fingers grazed my cheek with a startling gentleness. That is what worries me the most. The vehicle came to a stop. I looked through the window and saw that we were not at my apartment building. We were in front of his, the tower with the penthouse that overlooked the entire city. I cannot, I began to object. I am not inviting you to come upstairs. His thumb moved along my jaw, and a shiver went through me. I am asking you to allow me to ensure you arrive home without incident. That place you live, Emma, the locks are broken, the security is non-existent. Any person could simply walk inside. How do you know that? It is my job to know things. His hand dropped away, but the sensation of his touch lingered, particularly when it involves people who are important. I am not important to you. We only just met. Yes. His gaze held mine. You are. And no, we did not. Before I could question his meaning, he was exiting the vehicle and holding his hand out to me. Acting against every self-preservation instinct I had, I took it. His penthouse had a different feel at night. The city's lights spread out below us like a sea of diamonds, and the whole space felt alive with secrets and shadows. Damien's security detail had vanished the instant we stepped through the door, fading into the background where such men go when they are not required. I stood near the massive windows, hugging my arms around myself even though the room was warm. I could hear him moving behind me, the quiet sound of a glass bottle meeting a tumbler. Here. He was suddenly at my side, offering me a glass of amber liquid. You are trembling. I am fine. Still, I accepted the glass. I let the warmth of the expensive liquor calm my frayed nerves. Why did you do that tonight? You were in need of assistance. I offered it. He stood next to me at the window, close enough for me to feel his body heat. Yet he did not touch me. That is all it was. That is not all. You completely ruined him. Marcus looked as if he was about to collapse. I turned to look at him directly. What exactly did he take from you? Damien's jaw clenched. Does that matter? Yes, it matters. Because I have to know if I have just stepped into a dangerous situation. If Marcus is going to try to, I trailed off. The idea was too horrifying to say aloud. Marcus is not going to do anything. His tone held absolute certainty. He is fully aware of what happens to individuals who defy me. Tonight was an act of mercy, Emma. A simple warning, when it could have been something much, much worse. Those words should have sent a chill down my spine. Instead, they settled inside me like a truth I had somehow always understood. This man was a threat. This man possessed a kind of power that was greater than wealth or connections, and in some impossible way, he was directing that power to shield me. I need to go home. I placed the glass on a table, my fingers unsteady. This was all a mistake. Everything. Was it? He stepped closer, and I found myself pinned against the window. The cold glass was a jolt against my back. Tell me you did not like seeing him squirm. Tell me you did not feel a sense of relief when you walked in there with me instead of by yourself. That is not what this is about. That is exactly what this is about. He raised his hand, planting it on the glass beside my head. You called me because you needed someone on your side. I came because I wanted to be that person. Where is the mistake in that? You do not know anything about me. I know you work until you are completely exhausted at a hospital that does not value you. I know you volunteer for the late-night shifts that nobody else will take because you need the money. I know that someone hurt you so badly that 6 months later you still pull back when anyone gets too close. His eyes looked deep into mine. I know that you are much stronger than you believe you are, Emma Chen. My breathing stopped. How could you know all of that? I already told you. I make it my business to know things. He leaned a little closer, and I could smell his scent. Cologne, expensive leather, and something that was just him. Especially about people who capture my interest. Why do I capture your interest? The question was barely a sound. He smiled, but it was a smile without any warmth. That is what I am attempting to understand. The moment hung between us, charged with electricity and danger. Then my phone began to ring, and the sound shattered the tension. I fumbled inside the small purse Teresa had lent me. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. The name Marcus flashed on the screen. Do not answer that, Damien said, his voice sharp, but I had already swiped to accept the call. What? Emma, please, you need to hear me out. Marcus's voice was high and filled with panic. I do not know what you said to Cross, but you have to reverse this. You have to tell him it was all a big misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. Emma, I am begging you. He is going to destroy me. Everything I have ever built. Everything I have ever worked for. You mean everything you have ever stolen? The words were cold, and they surprised even me. Everything you have ever lied about. I never. He stopped, and I could hear his ragged breathing. Look, what happened with us was personal. This is about business. You should not mix the two, you mix them. You did it first when you came to my workplace just to humiliate me. I was not trying to humiliate you. I was trying to be kind, to make you feel included. By making certain I knew I was arriving alone? By reminding me that I have no one else? My voice rose higher, though I tried to control it. You wanted me to feel exactly how I felt, Marcus. Small and pathetic and unseen. Do not pretend you did not. Damien's hand appeared in front of me. It was open, palm up, a silent command. I looked from his hand to his eyes and saw something there that made my choice simple. I gave him the phone. Marcus. His voice was like silk wrapped around a blade of steel. Let me be perfectly clear about this. You are going to leave Emma alone. You will not call her, you will not text her, and you will not acknowledge her in any way. If I discover that you have so much as looked in her direction, what I did tonight will feel like a pleasant memory in comparison. Do you understand me? I could not hear what Marcus said in reply, but I saw Damien's expression grow even harder. That engagement is your smallest problem at the moment. I would advise you to concentrate on how you plan to justify the irregularities in your financial records to your associates. I have heard they are not nearly as lenient as I am. He finished the call and gave me my phone back. He will not trouble you anymore. You did not need to do that for me. Yes, I did. He stepped away from me, creating a space that felt strangely more unsettling than being close. You ought to stay here for the night. What? It is getting late. You are worn out. The guest bedroom has everything you will require. He was already moving toward the corridor. Teresa has put some clothes for you in the closet. Damien. He paused with his back still facing me. I am not suggesting we sleep together, Emma. I am suggesting you allow me to look after you. There is a distinction. Why? The question came out of me like a desperate plea. Why do you have so much concern for what happens to me? He turned around slowly, and the expression on his face made my heart skip a beat. Because when I saw you in that hospital, working yourself into the ground, so exhausted you could hardly stay on your feet, you still showed me kindness. You had no idea who I was. You did not care. You simply saw a person who required assistance, and you gave it. He moved a step closer to me. Do you have any idea how uncommon that is in the world I live in? I was just performing my job. You were being a human being in a way that most people have forgotten. He took another step, in a way that I had forgotten even existed. The space between us crackled with a dangerous energy. I should have turned and left. I should have demanded to be taken home. But instead, I heard my own voice ask, "Where is the guest room?" A hint of relief showed on his face, disappearing so fast I thought I might have been mistaken. Follow me. The guest room was stunning, with the same elegant simplicity as the rest of the penthouse. The bed looked incredibly inviting, and beyond the windows, the city lights sparkled like a promise. The bathroom is through there, Damien explained, pointing to a door. There are clothes in the closet. As I said, if there is anything you need, my room is just down the hall. He began to walk away, but I reached out and touched his arm. Thank you for this evening. For everything. His hand gently covered mine where it lay on his sleeve. Get some rest, Emma. We can talk in the morning. After he was gone, I remained standing in the middle of the room, trying to make sense of all that had occurred. The dress, the dinner, the look on Marcus's face, Damien's words. It all churned in my mind like a chaotic dream. I changed into the silk pajamas that I found waiting in the closet. Naturally, they were a perfect fit, and I slipped between sheets that felt as soft as clouds. I should have been too agitated to sleep, too shaken by the day's turmoil. But I fell asleep almost the moment my head hit the pillow. And for the first time in many months, I did not dream of Marcus, or the child I had lost, or the future that had slipped away from me like sand through my fingers. I woke up to sunlight pouring through unfamiliar windows and the aroma of coffee. For a brief, confused second, I could not recall. For a moment, I had no idea where I was. Then everything from the night before flooded back. In the kitchen, I saw Damien. He wore simple dark jeans and a gray sweater, an outfit that should have made him look ordinary, but instead made him seem even more threatening. One hand held a coffee cup, the other held his phone. Good morning, I managed, suddenly aware of how I looked in the pajamas he had given me. He raised his head, and the hardness in his eyes melted. Morning. I asked for coffee. He filled a mug for me from a coffee maker that looked more expensive than my entire car. The cup felt solid and warm in my hands. I tasted the coffee and almost sighed with relief. It was the best I had ever had. I need to leave, I told him, even as a part of me wanted to remain in this safe, beautiful place. I have to work tonight. A car will take you, he replied, putting his phone aside to focus completely on me. First, there is something we must discuss. A cold feeling spread through my stomach. Discuss what? About the future? He pushed himself against the counter, folding his arms. Marcus will not let this situation fade away. He will look for opportunities to harm us both. He has no reason to come after me. You can speak about his business, his connections, everything you have seen. The muscles in Damien's jaw clenched. You also have my focus now, and that makes you a target in ways you cannot yet imagine. I have no knowledge of his business. He is not aware of that. Damien stepped toward me. This means you must have security. I cannot pay for security. I am not requesting payment. He raised his hand and gently moved a piece of my hair from my face. I am giving it to you. For what reason? I moved away, creating distance so I could process this. What is your motive? He paused, an unreadable emotion crossing his features. It is because individuals I care about are not allowed to be harmed. That is the rule. I do not want to be someone you care about. The words felt like poison as I said them. I want nothing to do with the life that you lead. It is too late for that. His tone was soft, but carried undeniable finality. You entered my world when you made that call. You entered it when you allowed me to join you in that restaurant. He moved toward me again, eliminating the space I had created. You entered it when I chose to keep you safe. I do not belong to you. He nodded. Not at this moment. His statement remained in the air, a mixture of a pledge and a warning. In the other room, my phone vibrated. It was likely my job, asking about my absence. My normal life was trying to pull me back. I have to leave, I said in a low voice. I understand. But he stayed where he was, blocking my path. Emma, you must accept a few things. My life is filled with risk. The people I deal with do not follow society's laws. If you remain near me, that risk will touch you. Then I will keep my distance. Can you really? His gaze bored into mine. I doubt either one of us finds that believable now. He was correct. Heaven help me, he was correct. A change had occurred, between us. It was a feeling I could not name but also could not ignore. When he gazed at me, I was no longer unseen. I was visible in a manner that was both frightening and thrilling. Allow me to keep you safe, he offered quietly, just until this business with Marcus is resolved. After that, if you choose to leave, I will not stand in your way. Do you promise? A melancholy smile touched his lips. I will make an effort. I promise. That was not the assurance I was hoping for, but it was truthful. And for some reason, the honesty was more important. All right, I found myself agreeing. All right. The following 14 days were a strange mix of my old routine and reminders that everything was different. Damien largely stayed away. Yet, his influence was undeniable. The faulty locks on my building were repaired without notice. A modern alarm system materialized in my workshop, put in by capable men who worked in silence. My building manager suddenly recalled his promise to repair my sink. No matter where I was, I felt it. I could feel their eyes on me. They were not a threat, but a shield. His men were always there, hidden in the background, ensuring my safety. This should have been suffocating. Instead, for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. Marcus had kept his promise of silence, likely because Damien's threat forced him to. There were no phone calls, no messages, no sudden appearances at the hospital. Sarah told me the engagement party was the biggest gossip on the social scene. she said the moment Damien Cross entered with me on his arm. Marcus looked like he was about to faint. "Who is he?" she had asked while we drank terrible coffee from the cafeteria. More importantly, where can I find one for myself? I just laughed and gave her vague answers, saying he was just a friend. It was nothing serious. But at night, alone in my apartment with its new locks and security system, my mind would drift to his dark eyes, his gentle touch, and a voice that made promises I wasn't sure I wanted him to keep. He sent me simple text messages from time to time. "Did you eat today?" Or "How was your shift?" The questions seemed casual, but they carried a weight I could not ignore. I always replied. I convinced myself it was just common courtesy, a way to show gratitude for his assistance. I was not yet ready to admit it could be something more. 2 weeks and 3 days after that terrible dinner, I was covering a rare day shift when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but an instinct told me to answer. "Emma Chen?" a woman's voice said, crisp and professional. "Yes, this is Jennifer Walsh from the billing department at St. Catherine's. I am calling regarding your outstanding balance." A cold feeling washed over me. I had been pushing away thoughts of the hospital bills from the miscarriage, which were piling up faster than I could handle them. "I am on a payment plan." "Yes, I can see that noted here. The reason for my call is to let you know that your balance has been settled in full." The room seemed to spin. "What?" "Your account reflects a payment of $47,322, which we received yesterday. I wanted to confirm I did not authorize that payment." My voice sounded tight and strained. "Who paid it?" "The payment originated from Cross Industries." If this was a mistake, I ended the call before she could finish. My hands trembled so badly that the phone almost slipped from my grasp. He had paid off my medical debt without asking, without a single word. He had erased a financial burden that would have taken me years to overcome. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt a burning rage. My break was still 2 hours away, but I located Dr. Patterson and told him I had to leave immediately. A family emergency. He glanced at my face once and simply nodded, asking no questions. I already had Damien's address saved in my phone, though I had never acknowledged to myself why. The taxi ride felt like an eternity, my anger intensifying with every passing street. By the time I arrived at his building, I was seething. The doorman recognized me and waved me through without a word. The elevator trip to the 7th floor felt like a descent into war. I banged on his door with enough force to make my knuckles ache. It swung open almost instantly. Damien was standing there, wearing dress slacks and a shirt that was only halfway buttoned, obviously preparing to go somewhere. His eyes widened a little when he saw me. "Emma, you had no right to do that." I stormed past him and into his penthouse. "You had no right to do that without asking me first." He shut the door behind me, his face a mask of calm. "You are referring to the hospital bills." "Of course I am talking about the hospital bills. That was almost $50,000, Damien. You just threw $50,000 at my life as if it was pocket change to you. It is nothing." He walked toward me with caution, like someone approaching a scared animal. "Emma, you were drowning under the weight of that debt. I was in a position to help, so I did. I did not ask for your help. You should not have to ask." His voice grew louder, matching the intensity of mine. "You look after everyone else. You care for every patient that comes through those doors. You help every person who needs it. But who looks after you? I look after myself. I always have. And where has that brought you?" He gestured toward me, his composure finally starting to break. "You work yourself to exhaustion for a hospital that barely pays you enough to get by. You reside in an apartment that is not even safe. You are lucky if you get one meal a day. That is not taking care of yourself, Emma. That is merely surviving. Maybe surviving is all I can manage right now, but it is not all that you deserve." He closed the gap between us and lifted his hands to cup my face. "Do you not see? You deserve so much better than the life you have accepted for yourself." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I despised them. I despised the weakness they showed. You cannot just solve everything with money. Life does not work that way, I know that. His thumbs gently wiped away the tears that escaped, despite my efforts to hold them back. But money is the tool I have, Emma, and if I am able to use it to make your life just a little bit easier, why would I not? Because I refuse to be in your debt. A flicker of something crossed his face. Perhaps it was hurt, or maybe disappointment. Is that how you see this? A simple transaction of some kind, is it not? You provide help for me, and in return, I do what? What is it you want from me, Damien? I want you to stop working yourself into an early grave. I want you to have regular meals and sleep somewhere safe, and not look as if you are about to fall apart every time a person touches you. His hands moved down to my shoulders, his hold firm yet comforting. I want you to allow me to care for you without analyzing my motives each time I do something for you. Why? The question burst out of me. Why do you care this much? You hardly know anything about me. I know enough. His voice became low, filled with intensity and urgency. I know that you are much stronger than you believe you are. I know you feel everything so deeply, even when you try to hide it. I know that when you give a real smile, not that forced one you use at work, it is like watching the sun break through the clouds. He drew me closer. And I know that I have not been able to get you out of my head since the moment you touched me in that hospital, and it scares me to death. That confession hung in the air between us, charged like a brewing storm. My heart pounded against my ribs, and I could not tell if it was from fear or something entirely new. This is insane, I whispered. We are insane. Probably. His forehead rested against mine. Does that change how you feel? It should have. None of this was logical. His fixation on me, the way he made me feel, the dangerous world he lived in that I was slowly being pulled into. But logic had no place in how my body reacted to his closeness, or how my hands had instinctively found his chest, feeling the powerful rhythm of his heart beneath my palms. I do not know how to do this, I confessed. I do not know how to let another person get close to me again. Then we can learn how to do it together. He leaned back just enough to look me in the eyes. But first, there is something you need to understand. When I offer you help, when I fix your problems or pay for things or protect you, I am not expecting anything back. I am not keeping a tally. I do it because seeing you struggle when I have the power to ease that struggle causes me a physical pain. That is not normal. No, it is not. A faint smile touched his lips. But I gave up on being normal a very long time ago, Emma. The real question is whether or not you can live with that. Could I? Could I accept a man who paid my debts without permission? A man who had his guards follow me to ensure I was safe? A man who looked at me as if I were both precious and terrifying? Could I accept the danger that was part of his life? The world of shadows and violence that existed just beneath his expensive suits and gentle hands. I am scared, I said in a low voice. Good. That proves you are smart. His hands shifted to my waist, holding me steady. I am scared too, if that makes you feel any better. Of what? Of how much I care about you already. Of the things I might be willing to do to keep you safe. His eyes grew darker. Of how far I would go if anyone ever tried to harm you. Those words should have sounded like a threat. Instead, they felt like a vow, a promise that resonated deep in my bones as truth. I need some time, I said, to process all of this, to decide what it is I truly want. Take all the time you need. But his grip on my waist tightened just a little. Just promise me that you will stay safe while you are figuring things out. Your men are still watching me all the time. There was no hint of an apology in his tone. Does that bother you? It should have. No, I admitted. It makes me feel protected. A fierce, possessive look crossed his face. Good. We just stood there in his penthouse, held in each other's arms, with the city lights shining below. The city unfurled beneath us like a map of what could be. For the first time since Marcus had shattered my world, a sensation cut through the pain, the fatigue, the nothingness. I felt a spark of life. The vibration of my phone broke the spell. I pulled away with regret and checked the display. It was Sarah, asking if I was all right, reminding me that I had left my shift with no explanation. "I need to leave," I said. "I have to face work, explain why I just disappeared. I will arrange a car for you." Damien. Emma. He took my hand, raising it to his lips. The gesture was so antiquated it should have felt absurd, but it stole my breath instead. "Allow me this one simple act, please." I could only nod, not trusting myself to speak. He escorted me to the door, his hand resting warm and firm on the small of my back. It was a touch that felt like both protection and possession. At the doorway, I looked back at him. "The medical bills." "Thank you. I am still angry about the way you handled it, but I am also grateful. It was a weight that was crushing me." "I am aware." His smile was gentle and real. "That is the reason I did it." The black sport utility vehicle was waiting for me downstairs. It had the same driver from the terrible dinner that altered the course of my life. He gave me a brief nod in the rearview mirror, and I was surprised to find myself smiling in return. My phone began to ring as we merged with the traffic. It was another unknown number, but not the one from the hospital's billing office. "Hello, Emma Chen." The voice was a man's, coarse and strange. "You must stop seeing Damien Cross. For your own safety, you need to walk away right now." A chill went through my entire body. Who is this? Someone who is trying to keep you alive. Cross is a dangerous man, far more dangerous than you can imagine. The people who get close to him end up gone, or worse. If you have any sense, you will vanish before he thinks you know too much. The call ended. I remained motionless in the back of the car, clutching the phone in my shaking hand. I met the driver's gaze in the mirror. "Is everything all right, Miss Chen? Was anything all right?" My life was no longer okay. I had walked into a situation much larger and more perilous than I had ever realized. I did not know how deep this went, or if I was already in too deep to escape. But as the car moved through the city streets, we passed the hospital where I had spent countless hours feeling invisible. We drove by my former apartment, with its faulty locks and dripping faucet. And in that moment, I understood something vital. I had no desire to go back. No matter what happened next, no matter what threats were hidden in Damien's world, I was done merely getting by. For the very first time, I wanted to truly experience life, even if it ended up being the death of me. I did not mention the phone call to Damien. Not immediately. I returned to my job, offered a smile to Sarah's worried questions, and poured all my energy into my work. It was the kind of intense focus that comes when you want to avoid your own thoughts. But the man's words echoed in my mind. The people around him end up gone, or worse. 3 days went by. 3 days of routine shifts, of forced smiles, of pretending that my world was not tilting on its axis. 3 days of text messages from Damien, which I answered with growing openness. I started to feel the presence of his bodyguard as a comforting shadow instead of a cage. For 3 days, I tried to tell myself that I could leave him if I chose to. On the fourth day, my fragile peace shattered. I was leaving the hospital after a long night shift, so tired I was ready to fall into bed. That is when I saw him. Marcus was leaning on a car across the street. He was watching the employee exit with an intensity that made my stomach clench. I stopped dead on the steps. Every part of me wanted to run back inside, but he had already spotted me. He pushed himself off the car and began walking toward me with determined steps. "Emma, we have to talk. Damien instructed you to keep your distance from me." I reached for my phone, preparing to dial, but who would I call? The police? Damien's security detail, who I sensed were somewhere close. "This is critical. This is about Cross." Marcus looked awful. He had dark rings beneath his eyes. His normally immaculate look was a mess. Please, just 5 minutes. I went against my own better judgment and agreed. 5 minutes. We will talk right here, where everyone can see us. He shot a nervous look around, as if he expected someone to step out of the darkness. Perhaps he did. You have no idea what kind of trouble you are in. Cross is not the man you believe he is. I know exactly what he is. Do you really? Marcus let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Do you know about the warehouse fire in 2019 that resulted in 3 deaths? Are you aware of the shipments that pass through his docks that are not exactly legal? Or the way his enemies have a habit of disappearing? My throat felt dry, but I managed to keep my voice even. If he is so dangerous, then why are you still walking around? Because I am useful to him. Because I possess information that he requires. Marcus took a step nearer, and I could see the fear in his eyes. It was pure, unfiltered terror. But you, Emma, you are a risk. You know about me, about the engagement party, and about his methods. When you are no longer of use to him, that is it for you. That will be quite enough. The voice came from right behind me. It was deep, cold, and filled with an absolute rage. I turned around quickly and saw Damien getting out of a black sport utility vehicle that I had not seen arrive. He walked with a lethal sense of purpose, his guards on either side of him. The expression on his face turned my blood to ice. Marcus turned pale. Cross. I was only trying to scare her. Damien's hand settled on my lower back, the possessive touch that I had started to recognize. I gave you explicit instructions to stay away from her. I was just trying to warn her. She has a right to know. What she has a right to, Damien interrupted, his voice lowering to a menacing level, is to be left in peace by men who have already caused her enough harm. He looked at his guards. Please escort Mr. Hayes back to his car. Make certain he understands that if he approaches Emma again, our business relationship is terminated. The confidence drained from Marcus's face. Please, the engagement is over. I have already lost half of my clients. Amber's family refuses to have anything to do with me. Those are consequences, Damien stated plainly. They are the result of your choices. You should be thankful they are not more severe. His men stepped forward and Marcus backed away, all of his earlier confidence gone. You are making a terrible mistake, Emma, he yelled as they guided him away. He will ruin you, just like he ruins everyone else. And then he was gone, pushed into his car, which sped away from the curb as if it were being chased by the devil himself. I stood there on the hospital steps, completely still. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to make sense of what just occurred. Damien's hand remained on my back, a firm pressure that somehow kept me from falling apart. How long were you standing there? I asked. Long enough. He turned me so I was facing him, his gaze studying my face. Are you all right? I do not know. It was the only honest answer I had. Is it true what he said? About the fire, the shipments, and the people who vanish? Damien's jaw grew tight. Yes. That one word struck me with the force of a punch. A part of me had desperately wanted him to deny it all, to laugh it off and call Marcus a liar. But he did not. He gave me the truth, sharp and without mercy. I am not a good man, Emma. His hands moved to cup my face. I have done things that would make you sick. I have hurt people and I have destroyed lives. I exist in a world where violence is a tool and loyalty is purchased with fear. Then why me? Because you are not part of that world. His thumbs gently stroked my cheekbones. Because when I am with you, I remember what it is like to want to be a better person. Not a good person. I can never be good. But better than what I am now. Tears began to sting my eyes. I received a phone call 3 days ago. Someone warned me to stay away from you. His face darkened. Why did you not tell me? Because I was worried you would do something awful to the person who called. Because I was trying to figure out if they were telling the truth. I placed my hands over his. Because I am scared, Damien. I am scared of you, of the world you live in, and of how much I have already started to care for you. Despite all of it, you have every right to be scared. He pulled me in closer, until there was barely any space between us. Everything Marcus told you is true. I am a dangerous man. Being with me will always put you in danger. The sensible thing for you to do would be to walk away from me right now and never turn back. I know. But you are not going to leave, are you? A flicker of something that looked like hope appeared in his eyes. No. The word came from my mouth, steady and sure. Because I have spent my entire life being safe. And look where that has gotten me. I ended up with a man who cast me aside the second I became a problem. I have a job that barely pays enough to keep me afloat. I had an existence that felt less like living and more like slowly drowning. I took a step forward, closing the final gap between us. Perhaps I needed the danger. Perhaps I simply needed you. His self-control shattered. He crushed his mouth to mine in a kiss that had no gentleness, no caution. It was pure possession, a desperate promise. I answered him with all my strength, channeling 6 months of agony and isolation and terror into our connection. We finally tore away from each other, gasping for air, and he rested his forehead against mine. If you choose me, I cannot promise you a safe life. I cannot promise it will be easy. My only promise is this. I will shield you with my entire being, and anyone who dares to harm you will have to deal with me. You will never, ever be ignored again. That is enough. And it truly was. Heaven forgive me, it was. That is more than I could ask for. Come home with me. It was not a question, and not quite a command. It was a plea, an offer. Stay. I should have refused. I should have requested time, needed distance, tried to find any logic in this utterly mad situation. But instead, I just nodded. The penthouse had a different feel this time. Or maybe I was the one who felt different. No longer an intruder, but someone who belonged. Damien's security detail faded away the moment we arrived, granting us solitude in the vast space overlooking the city lights. There is something you have to understand, Damien said, guiding me toward the same windows we had stood before weeks ago. My enemies are going to see you as a vulnerability. They will attempt to hurt you as a way to get to me. You will face real peril, and there will be times I cannot protect you from it. I understand. Do you? He asked, turning me to face him directly. Because once you belong to me, completely and truly, there is no turning back. I do not share, Emma. I do not let things go. If you give yourself to me, I will keep you, and I will not be gentle in doing so. Those words should have sent fear through me. Instead, they lit a spark in my soul that felt dangerously like desire. Show me. His eyes turned dark and intense. Emma, show me what it feels like to be yours. My hands traveled up his chest, my fingers finding the small buttons of his shirt. I was done with being cautious, finished with being afraid. I want to see what happens when I finally stop running. For a second, he just looked at me, as if he could not process what I had said. Then, his self-control completely fractured. He kissed me with an intensity that felt like he wanted to consume me whole. His hands were everywhere, gripping my waist, sliding up my back, weaving into my hair. I met his passion with my own, yanking at his shirt until buttons flew and scattered on the floor. My hands explored his skin, which was hot and firm and undeniably real. "Are you certain?" he whispered, his breath against my lips. "I am certain." I had never felt more sure of any single thing in my entire life. He lifted me into his arms, carrying me through the hallway and into his bedroom. This time it was not the guest room, but his own room, his own domain. The bed was immense, covered in dark silk sheets that felt cool on my hot skin as he set me down. "I have to hear you say the words," he insisted, his body covering mine. His weight was both perfect and overpowering. "Tell me you belong to me. I am yours." The words came out like an act of liberation. "I am yours, Damien." What followed was not gentle. It was an act of possession, of claiming, a surrender between two people who had circled each other for too long. He paid homage to my body with his hands and his mouth, memorizing every sound I made, pushing me to a peak until I came apart in his arms. And when he finally moved inside me, when our bodies moved in flawless rhythm, it felt like finding a home I never knew I was looking for. After we remained a tangle of limbs, the lights from the city casting shadows across our bodies. His fingers drew idle patterns on my shoulder, and I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. I was serious about what I said. He spoke quietly into my hair. You belong to me now. I will eliminate anyone who tries to separate you from me. That statement should have concerned me more than it actually did. His chest vibrated with a soft laugh. It probably should. He drew me in tighter. Come live with me. I raised my head to meet his gaze. What did you say? Your apartment is not secure. In this place, I can give you real protection. Here, you will have everything you could possibly want. His hand cradled my cheek. Here, you can be with me. Just agree. His thumb traced the line of my lips. Let me provide for you in the manner you have always deserved. Let me offer you the kind of life Marcus was supposed to provide. I do not want the life Marcus offered. No, you deserve something better. He gave a smile that was real and full of warmth. So, permit me to give it to you. It was all happening too quickly. It was too intense. It was too much of everything. But when I looked into his eyes and saw the unwavering conviction there, the raw protectiveness and the possessive want, I found that I was nodding. Yes, that single word altered my entire world. In 1 week, my small collection of belongings was moved into his penthouse apartment. In 2 weeks, I had officially notified my landlord I was leaving. Within a month, I had reduced my working hours at the hospital. I now worked an almost normal amount because Damien would not allow me to work myself into an early grave. Marcus vanished from my world entirely, although I heard stories that he had fled the city, relocating to a place far beyond the influence of Damien Cross. Amber had supposedly broken up with him before he left, taking her family's wealth and influence with her. I was supposed to feel a sense of guilt. I felt nothing. Sarah came to visit one time, her eyes growing wide as she absorbed the scale of the penthouse. The incredible view, the undeniable proof of a fortune beyond comprehension. So, you are actually going through with this, creating a home with the frightening crime figure. He is not a part of the mob. That was a fine point. Damien's business dealings occupied a legally ambiguous space, but he was not part of a traditional crime family. And I am not just playing, Emma. She took my hand, her face turning serious. I am glad that you are happy, truly, but you have to be careful, understand? Men of his kind are not safe. I know, I squeezed her hand back, but being safe has not gone very well for me. Perhaps a little danger is precisely what I require. 6 months after that evening in the hospital, when I had wiped blood from the temple of a stranger, I was standing in Damien's penthouse, our penthouse, with a ring that had materialized on my finger 2 weeks before. It was not a ring for an engagement, he had clarified, but a ring of promise, a token showing that I was his and he was mine. The path ahead of us was unclear and almost certainly filled with peril. His adversaries were not imaginary, and the dangers were quite real. But as Damien folded his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder while we gazed at the city below, I felt more secure than I ever had when I was trying to be invisible. Any regrets? He asked in a low voice. I considered Marcus, the life that I had lost, and the person I was 6 months ago. She was depleted, unnoticed, and sinking. Then I considered the woman I was in that moment. I was seen, I was claimed, I was alive, no regrets. I turned within his embrace, rising to my tiptoes to kiss him, not even one. His arms constricted around me, possessive, protective, and perfect. Good. Because you are bound to me now, Emma Chen. Forever. The word forever had the sound of danger. It had the sound of impossibility. It had the exact sound of what I had been seeking without even realizing it. Forever I consented and kissed him once more. Outside, the metropolis sparkled with endless possibilities. Inside, held in the arms of a perilous man who had unexpectedly become my savior, I finally grasped what it meant to be truly living. It was not a safe life, not a careful one, but a complete, intense, and dangerously alive existence. And I would not choose to have it any other way. If Emma's story touched something inside you, if you have ever felt invisible, underestimated, or forgotten by someone who should have loved you, drop a comment and tell me, what was the moment you decided you deserved more? I read every single one. And if this story gave you chills, hit that like button, share it with a friend who needs to hear this today, and subscribe so you never miss another story like this one. New stories drop every week. And trust me, the next one hits even harder. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories and valuable life lessons.